I sent you a chat at the beginning, but
I just looked at it now. Yeah, it's hard for me to chew gum and do whatever, so I was waiting for a break to look at the chat.
yeah,
Yeah,
me too. When I'm doing a Zoom, it's kind of impossible to look at the
yeah.
chat.
So what did you think of, and this of course goes back to the very opening piece of this video when he says he went into the desert and the devil tempted him.
Well, this segment brought up so many questions for me. I wish I had a pencil and paper so I could have written them down, because now I've forgotten most of them. But is the ego real? I mean, I think I have been wondering if it almost sounds like a dual personality within us. Like there's this ego, and then there's the real us, and I've been starting to think about the ego as just another illusion. It's like an identity that's not real, it's not us, but it somehow has a power over us. I mean, it's really, I think, a tough concept to grapple with.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's a good question, great question.
So I'll just stop there.
Okay. So I could answer it, but I think I'm going to open it up. So is the ego real? How would you describe the ego, or what are your thoughts about what the ego is?
I experience it as very real, but unrealistic, if you know what I mean. It's like, you know, it is a presence within me. It's a voice within me, I guess, is and it's a way. It kind of shows me the way I react when I'm not reacting out of love and compassion and all those other good things. You know, I contract into my little self, or as he said in the video, it's about separation. When I separate from the one and think I'm just, you know, I go back into the illusion that none of you all exist. I'm the only thing there is. Right. And anyway, so it's an unrealistic, it's not a complete view of actuality. You know, it's the view from the lens of there's no connection between me and anything else. And I have to be in control, and I have to respond in fear, and I have to protect myself, and with all these kinds of reactions and stuff. So it's a sort of contracted part of the psyche or something. Anyway, that's my first hit on that.
Thank you. Wendy?
You know, I think about neurobiology in these conversations, and the ego has a very distinct function to play in our lives. I mean, it evolved to help us survive, right? So if you think about the triune brain with the reptilian part of us that's worrying about survival, the limbic part of us that's worried about emotions, and then the neocortex, which evolved to provide executive functioning, the ego as a function of personality is our user interface to the world. And so I don't disrespect the ego at all, because that's where you know, we rely on the ego to give us feedback, to tell us when we're appropriate, when we're inappropriate, you know, when our flight, fight, or freeze function should be operative. So that the ego is that sort of part of us that responds in a way that, you know, that's healthy in terms of setting boundaries, in terms of, you know, kind of helping us navigate the world a little bit. And so, you know, when Leonard talks about the idea of respecting the ego or not, you know, devaluing it, he's absolutely right on. Where I think he's going is that the ego has over dominated. It's run amok. It's describing, or not describing, but kind of defining us in a way where, you know, it's the one that kind of says, I'm separate from the rest of the world. I think the balance is coming back into equilibrium with the true essence of self, and listening to the ego as just one data point, and not necessarily taking it for the truth all the time. It's a feedback loop. So when I'm in conversation with somebody and I'm triggered, that's the ego saying my opinion is right over your opinion. Or, gee, there's somebody who looks like they're going to run a stoplight. For my own self-preservation, the ego steps in and says, oh, better, put on the brakes and not assert my right to be in the intersection ahead of that person. So I get more from this, that the work is in toning down the voice of the ego so that the voice of essence can assert itself in a way that is, allowing us to be loving and compassionate, to be calm and peaceful in the face of perceived threat. So I don't think the ego is a bad thing, and I do think it's very real. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Wendy.
This is
Anybody
making
else?
Yeah, this is making me think of a concept, I think it's out of A Course of Love, where the ego's just gotten in the driver's seat and has become the master. And we need to switch roles and allow the ego to be the servant that it was meant to be, the servant of the heart. And that's really helpful. So Wendy, you helped me get back to that understanding. But I've got a feeling that if I were to weigh in on my question, I would say it's not real, in the sense that it's not eternal. It is temporary. It's a function of this life, this body. And so your description of, the brain and how it's really kind of the voice of the neurobiology, that's really a helpful way to think about it. So I guess I would say the answer to my question, I would answer it as it's not real.
Marianne?
Okay. I think it's like Satan. It's self-created. I mean, when you look at Donald Trump's ego, it's different from our egos. And all of this has been perpetuated by the way we were raised, or, just our self-concept. And so I think it's the self-created or created by our family and our surroundings entity.
Okay. Kristen, were you going to say something? Or?
Sorry. Well, I look at the ego in my own life in regards to my willfulness, because when I know I'm not an ego, it's a matter of being in presence and allowing myself to be God directed rather than willfully directed in my own thoughts.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of like what Eckhart Tolle said when he was suicidal. He said, I can't stand you anymore. You are driving me crazy. Who was having the conversation? Who's having the conversation that you just said there, that it's me being me being God directed? Well, who's the me? So I think that the ego is real. I think that the ego is a part of consciousness, and I'll use the analogy again of the ocean, that when he gave a hint as to when the ego comes into balance. He said, when it's in presence and it's in silence, you are still aware that there's a you experiencing expanded consciousness. There's a you that's experiencing what you would call the divine. You're experiencing the voice of God, the presence of God, the love of God, but there's a container that is you, that something moves into or expands through. And I think the ego is like the drop of water that is, when it's in its best place, it's just totally one with the ocean. but it's an individuated point of awareness and consciousness that is eternal. Because what would be the point otherwise? We would come here, we would be an ego, and it would be destroyed and done with. Well, so what? Then God, we might as well be ants. He's just like, kill them all, and then he's left. The whole understanding of creation is that God wanted to extend itself into an other and to share God's love and presence with the other, and then have the other willfully decide to be in relationship with the divine and be in a relationship of love. So there has to be some individuated heart there to be able to do that. And I think that is the ego. And when it's aware that it is one with everything, then you almost, you don't feel the willfulness, you don't feel the reactivity, because it isn't doing that. But when it sort of clamps and goes into the place of fear, then it gets really strong. And it's like Matt Kahn says, it's the overstimulated nervous system. That's like, always, and it develops this identity for itself that seems really real, much more real than its actual bigger self. So I'll stop there. Wendy. You have to unmute yourself, Wendy.
Sorry, I just looked up ego and discovered that it is the Latin word for I.
Mm.
Isn't that interesting, right? Because if, as you just said, the individuation, right? If the ego is the I, then presence is the we. So just thought I'd pass that handy, helpful little tidbit along. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Mm.
Right. And Kathy is next. And Matt Kahn says that the I can either be the I or one, depending on how you want to look at it. Kathy.
So, at least for me, it's taken quite a long time in my life to be able to differentiate the egoic self from the divine self or from the witness. One of the things that will catch my attention easily is the ego, because usually it will speak first and speak loudest. And that is why it is so helpful for me to learn to breathe, to learn to listen, to learn to be in silence, to learn to meditate. All of those things really enrich my life and put me more in the flow of continuous contentment, which did not used to be one of my greatest values, right? My goal in life was not continuous contentment. And now I find that I just long for that flow, just like the river, because it feels so good. It just feels so good. It's a rich way to be. The ego is so used to judgment, rejection, and struggle. That is why I can be distracted, right? Because you can spend a lot of time doing those kinds of things. Whereas if I'm breathing and I notice, right, and I'm paying attention, then I do fall right into love and acceptance. And then that flow and that harmony, it's just heaven on earth to me. It leaves me completely free to be part of unity, which is the way it is.
Thank you. All right. Richard wants to get back in.
So Wendy, let me tag on to that. One of the most useful things I ever heard about this was in my college psychology class. And the professor said, Freud did not call it the ego. Let's start the whole discussion right there. And he said the word he used was in German, ich, which means I. And all of a sudden, all the layers of confusion, of complication about this term ego is like, oh, they're just talking about the I identity. And then the next most useful thing was from the minister at Santa Rosa Center for Spiritual Living. And he said, imagine you have a board of directors. Don't make the ego the chairman. And it was just like, oh my God. It gave me this wonderful metaphor and image of there's all these different voices. There's different parts of me that want to give me advice and direct me, and and just listen to the ego as one member of the board, but not the one that's in charge. Thank you. And then he said exactly what Jerry and Leonard were saying. If you resist the ego and keep ignoring it on the board, it's going to keep raising its hand. But if you love it and say, oh, thank you, that's very good advice, but you know what? I think in this situation, I'm going to follow this other, member of the board.
Yeah. Yes, the good old committee in our head. So anybody else? Sydney, Ken, Mary, anybody who hasn't? Oh, Wendy, you're Claire.
I just wanted to say, Jerry, what your response was persuaded me. The ego was real.
Yeah, because, it just doesn't make any sense to think that the ego is going to die, to me at least. Because ego is consciousness. But it's like a wave that comes up out of the ocean and then blends back in again, and the idea is not to make it like this big tidal wave, which is what it wants. But, if I need it, it comes up, like I'm driving a car, as Wendy was talking about. But then when I don't need it, when I'm just not really doing anything much, then I can let it go back down. So it's more like this wave of energy that is more fluid, and utilize it when you need it. But if you don't need it, like it goes to sleep mode. And there is that aspect also of the ego having a flavor or a fragrance that is unique, and that's when Metcon said this first, I had a lot of struggle with it, because he was saying, yes, personality is divine, because a lot of spiritual writings would say the personality isn't, that it's just like a garment that you discard. And he was saying that no, there's a frequency to our personality, our ego, that is unique to each one of us, and it's like a scent of a flower. And that if you were out there in the universe with everybody else, you would look around and you would know where your mom was, or your spouse, or whoever, because you can sense that frequency, and it's a one-off frequency. And I think there's something very beautiful about that. Like there's something very respectful about that the divine creates things, and that he's sharing the eternal, infinite presence. So any other thoughts on this? Okay.
I had a question.
Uh-huh.
There was a zinger at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember what that was at? Something you've put in your notes? It was a little one-liner, the ego is blah, blah, blah. And I went, oh my gosh. It's almost the first thing he said, I think.
I don't know.
No?
Yeah. He talked a lot about illusion and hallucination at the beginning, but yeah.
Well, it was one of those things that personalizes it, like all of our discussion here. you know,
Okay.
trying to grab a handle on it in another way, and I forget.
Maybe I can come back to it later on.
Yeah,
Because I think
okay.
we're going maybe to get through the recording today. Okay, Claire?
He said something that really kind of startled me. Said something about if his ego hadn't been externalized as kind of an illusion or a hallucination. I mean, he said he would have been lost and separated forever. And he used the word forever. He would have been separated forever or lost forever. And I thought, wow, is he just being hyperbolic, or did he really mean that? I mean, I didn't think we could ever be separate. We could maybe be lost, but not separate. Do you remember him saying that?
No, I don't. Oh,
Well,
well,
I'm pretty sure I heard it right,
yeah.
but
We
anyway.
can come back to that section at the end.
The message I heard in that, what sort of the way, I don't remember exactly how he said it, but he was saying it was almost like it was a gift that I hallucinated this ego, because then I was more aware of it, and it was this thing
Right.
I could have a conversation with. So it made clear, it sounded like it made clear to him the fact that you are arguing with this ego all the time, but he was unconscious about that, and by hallucinating it and having something that could see, it became more real. So then he could like wrestle with the devil, which I think is one of the scriptural references in that.
Yeah, I got that, but it was just this idea that he used the words, I would have been lost forever. And that just startled me.
Yeah. Yeah, the problem with the ego is that, you know, you don't know what you don't know. If you are not aware of how this program is running your life, just because it's been there all the time and you haven't had the separation enough to be able to notice, that's the problem for all of us. It's we sort of haven't learned this growing up, how to be quiet and to observe and to watch the interaction of our ego with life and to kind of parse it out. We don't see the connection, you know, we may see the connection from A to B, but we don't see that down here at F and G, all of that is coming from what I thought way back there. I saw a video online over the weekend of a woman having a complete meltdown in a store because the cashier asked her to put a mask on. And she just lost it and started flinging everything out of this big cart full, smashing it against the floor, you know, and just this went on like for a good 2 minutes. And I was thinking, you know, talk about someone being lost. I mean, they were just like gone into this rage and no modulation. That's, you know, we catch ourselves in those moments when we have those major reactions, but it's the more subtle stuff that, you know, isn't that obvious to us. And yeah, so maybe if we all fasted for 40 days, we might get some insight. Okay, back to the next section. Okay.
One final thing. This idea of the devil being the collective energy, I thought was utterly fascinating and a brand new idea for me. And how much that just brings it home to me, how important it is for us to clear the collective. Whatever we can do as individuals to clear the collective is huge. And so that was just a really important point that I didn't hear the first time we watched this video. So thank you.
Well, and the other part of that is that that's like what Paul called the system. It is this collective energy that each one of us is adding to. It's like the screen behind me, each little square, makes up the screen. And so when you look at something like racism, then it becomes very clear that each one of us is contributing a little portion of the overall picture, and that it is really important for each one of us to do the work on our square of the board so that the collective loses its energy. And that is the sin of the world, in the sense that the Christ mind, the mind that is aware of its oneness with everything and everyone, undoes the collective picture that says we're all separate and it's every man for himself, and it's Darwinian kind of approach to life, survival of the fittest, all of that. So we're talking about a real presence, a real energy that is poisonous and is doing horrible things in the world to people. But it's not this goat-like creature with horns running around, tripping people up. It's in here. Yeah.
Jerry?
Uh-huh.
Are you, that makes me, the question that comes up, are you saying that then racism, sexism, all that stuff is our culture's version of Satan? It's the collective ego separation thing?
Yeah, it's the behavior that comes about from that type of egoic consciousness that is about separation and fear. I mean, just look at white supremacists.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that pretty clear what that's all about? It's the ego valuing its point of view to the detriment of everybody else.
I just never can put that together with the concept of Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm imagining, a KKK minister in a Southern church somewhere, talking about we have to go out and lynch somebody as a message from God or something, I'm making it extreme to make it almost.
Well, no, it's not extreme. That's exactly what happens. You have the person up there being the minister, giving the message, saying, this is what God wants, because whites are superior. And then you go back to the Old Testament of the mark of Cain. So this is nothing new. It's all the way back to Adam and Eve, as they say. Yeah, but it's a systematic sin is what Jesus was talking about, not the usual sins of the flesh that the West got totally caught up in and then just ignored the systemic sin, for forever. Who was talking about the feudal system being evil? No one. No, the king was the divine appointee of God. So therefore, the whole system was being backed up by the church, just like slavery. Mm-hmm. Perverse.
Yeah.
All right.
To be present is the simplest thing. It is your natural state. Every moment you have a choice. Will you be present in the truth and reality of this moment? Or will you allow yourself to be seduced into the past and future world of the mind? 2,000 years ago, I cautioned you about the power of thought to lead you astray. Which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit unto his stature? Therefore, take no thought for the morrow, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? Or how shall we be clothed? But seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. If you do seek the kingdom of God, you will have to find your way into the present moment, for the present moment is the doorway to God. The present moment is God revealed. And if you find yourself at the deepest level of presence, you will encounter the living presence of God in all things present. What do you think omnipresence means? For religious believers, it is a comforting concept. But for mystics who are fully present, it is a living reality. The present moment is always calling for your attention. Every leaf moving on every tree is waving to you. It is saying, here I am. Will you not be present with me? Will you not see me? Each flower is trying to attract you with its color and its beauty. What more can I do, asks the flower. Will you not see me? Will you not be present with me? Do you not know who I am? I am God in the form of a flower, and I am trying to attract your attention. Be present with whatever is here now. And when you are truly present, I can ask you, who is present in this moment? I am, a silent presence of pure consciousness, an eternal silent presence. I am that eternal silent presence of pure consciousness. I am that I am. This infinite and eternal silent presence is the very essence of your being. It is your true nature. It is that dimension of you which is of this moment and only of this moment. It is the Christ of you. It is the I am of you. This leads me to my most important clarification. It is written in the New Testament that I said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Only through me do you come to God. These two sentences form the foundation of Christianity. Never before in the history of the world has so few words led so many so far astray. I did not say that. I could not say that. I would never place myself between you and God. God is within you. You cannot come to God through me. I've meditated on that sentence many times, feeling responsible for leading so many astray. But it is clear to me now what actually happened. In the reporting or translating of my words, they left out a word. One word is missing from that sentence, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If we place the missing word back in the sentence, then suddenly everything makes sense and Christians will be back on track. Only then will my words and my teaching have the power to awaken you. Just one simple word with two letters. And the missing word is. I am is the way, the truth, and the life. Only through the I am presence do you come to God. And I would hasten to add that the I am of me is within me. But the I am of you is within you. How can it be otherwise? The way to God is not through me, but through the I am presence within you. When you awaken fully into the present moment, you are restored to life and you are restored to oneness with God.
This is probably one of the most powerful passages, not just in this video, but in a sense in any video or discussion about God. And when you think about it, how religion has placed Jesus in the way of God. You know, you must have this relationship with Jesus to get to God, and if you don't, then you can't have a relationship with God. And of course, on an interfaith level or ecumenical level, that is really troublesome and problematic, because what about the Buddhists? What about the Hindus? What about any other religion? He becomes a doorstop, not a doorway. And you know, what he's putting out here is that each one of us has this I am-ness, this sense of being. And when we talk about it, we use the words I am. And each one of us is having the exact same experience of that presence, and we each call it I am. Because it is the one, it's the same, and each one of us is just an expression of that. And what he's saying is that if you want to discover God, then you have to experience your I amness, your beingness itself. That's the divine. And that's the way, it's the truth, and it's life. It's like when you discover that, it is like the ocean flowing through that single little molecule. You know, I'm not a single drop in the ocean. I'm the ocean in a single drop. You expand so much that life suddenly just surges through you, and the vitality of that beingness. That's blowing your mind. That's having a mystical experience. And in that moment, you know the truth of your being. You know who you are. I am the divine. And it's not a mental thing. It's, again, the mental thing is kind of turned off, and it becomes this experience of truth and oneness and I amness. And then it's like Leonard Jacobson is saying, the way to that is through the present moment, and it's through presence, and it's through silence. And the more you sit in the silence, the more ability you will have to understand and to experience what is in this space of silence. And you begin to explore it, you begin to go deeper. It's like if you're out there in space, and initially you can sense that you're in a galaxy, and it's this one particular galaxy. And then the next time you go in there, and now suddenly you're aware that the galaxy is just in this piece of the sky, and now you're starting to see the other galaxies around, and it just keeps expanding like that until you can feel the whole universe. So the doorway, the way to the truth of our being and of who we are, is through the present moment, my I amness now. And it's the only way, and that's all he was saying. Your I am experience is the way, the truth, and the life. Okay, over to you guys. Richard. Oh, let's go to Marion first. All right, Marion, you hit your hand up. We're not hearing you, Marion.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Barely. You might have to lean a little closer to the microphone.
Okay. Kristen's working on the volume.
Okay.
Is
That's
this
better.
better now?
Yeah.
Okay. I just think if this were more openly revealed, more universally, you know, how appealing it is. I mean, I know so many people who have nothing to do with church because they feel like, you know, they're being brainwashed or, you know, what does this have to do with me? And, you know, so I think this is truly profound.
Yeah, certainly is.
Since I'll go ahead and say something since I'm here. I loved how he expressed how you go to a flower and do you not know who I am? I have, you know, sheltering at home, I've had so much time to just go into my garden and I feel such a presence and so much of God speaking through me, through the vegetables and the flowers and life and the birds. I've never felt anything so profound in my life, just being present in the world of, you know, where I live, here in nature. And my mom, I'll just say my mom, who was never really involved in spiritual groups or anything, she always said her whole life that her spirituality, her closeness to God was through nature. And she doesn't go to classes and read spiritual books, but nature is God in just full blossom and so much love. And, you know, I've had birds just come right up to me out of my hand and I'm, you know, I could hear them speak and I could see God, I could feel God. And then I just feel it in myself. And then I feel there's nothing else I need. So anyways, I just wanted to share that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. That the presence is all around us, but you know, like if you're in a car and you're going from A to B and all you're interested in is going from A to B, getting to B, and your mind is on what you're going to get, shopping or whatever, or to where you're going, you know, you're not in the present moment and you're not in touch with everything that is around you. And, you know, there are people who we know that talk to the trees and they feel that the trees give the message. There are people who talk to plants and plants will tell them, use this for this disease or whatever. That there is that level of presence that we can enter into, and it is a communication. And that the more we do that, then you become more mystical, you know, and the poets and the artists, that's kind of what they're doing. Richard.
You know, my first reaction was, oh my God, get up on the rooftops and sing this to everybody. This is the real good news.
Right.
So I grabbed my pad and I wrote down when you were sort of debriefing, the one within me is the I am presence, or another way of saying it, it's the individualization of what I am is an individualization of the whole, of the one. Mm-hmm. Anyway, am I on track? Is that the one within me is what the I am is?
Right.
Right. Great.
Claire.
You know, I don't know if you remember this conversation you and I had years ago, but when I finally stumbled onto Unity, I had already rejected the teaching that you have to invite Jesus into your heart to be saved and all that kind of stuff. I had rejected that, but when I came to Unity, it was like I was pulled, I resonated with it, but this verse was the stumbling block for me. And I came to your office and I said, okay, so what about the verse, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. And your answer was basically what you said, because you're grounded in this. And so with Leonard Jacobson, he addressed the first question. I am is the way, the truth, and the life. But then he didn't address the second statement, so I would hazard a guess it would be, no one comes to the Father except for not me, but except for the I am present. Is that how you would see it?
Because
Yeah.
if you go
This is
back,
huge.
if you go back to Moses, and he asked God, "Who are you?" God said, and this is the teaching in the Old Testament, like this is the pinnacle of anything that was revealed in the Old Testament. He said, "I am that I am," meaning I'm beingness. And so if you want to come to beingness, oneness, love, whatever word you want to put on it, you have to come through your I am presence, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
There's no other way to experience God.
Yeah, this is so huge, because I mean, Leonard addressed this would free and liberate so many Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And this resonates with, like, when you read the Sufi poets, Hafiz and what's his name? Rumi. And I mean, this is their language. This is what they're saying, you know, that interchange between the lover and the beloved, you know, it's all this beautiful stuff. Sydney, I think you want to say something.
I just wanted to say that this is life-saving for me.
Beautiful.
And I'm just drawn to it like a moth to light. If you'll forgive the analogy,
Right.
but it's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So I'm totally committed to 5 minutes a day, and it'll probably expand exponentially, but got to do it. This whole thing about presence is just wonderful. It
Right.
feels so healing.
Yeah.
So kind.
It's life-giving because,
Yes.
you know, it's the way, the truth, and the life.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing this to me.
Oh, thank you.
Mm.
Yeah. That's that's what it's all about, you know,
I
when
know.
someone says, you know, what you just said. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
So Kathy Lee, then Wendy.
Thank you. So one of the pleasures, I guess, of being present is being able to be captured, really, by those things that are good or beautiful or true. And it is so easy for a flower to capture my complete attention. I'm so happy I got to get a new phone, because now I can see these flowers even in more detail than I could before. So that was good. I've always wondered who I am and who we are as people. It's one of the central questions of my life. And I used to ask myself and pay attention and wonder, am I more what I think? Am I more how I feel? Or am I more what I do? And then later I would add, or am I more what I believe? Or am I more what I value? All of those things. And the answer is yes, except no, right? Because we are all one, and it is the isness where I live. And I love unity for that, because then I have companions that I can talk with. I also want to say, though, that for me, from the start, I have been very fond of Jesus, and I remain very fond of Jesus.
Yeah, and there is that, like, we're not throwing a baby, Jesus, out with the bathwater.
Right.
You know, it's of course your your mother is special to you because you came from her, your father. So in the same way, for many of us, the one who showed up was Jesus and Mary and whoever else. But for others, it's Buddha, or it's Krishna, or whoever. In the native Indian tradition, grandfather or whatever. And there's a special place for many of us because he was the doorway. He was the friend who introduced us to the I am presence. And that's, so there's no need to diminish him, but we're just being clear that, like he outlined in this section of video, that Jesus did not say, I, Jesus, am the way, the truth, and the life. And unless you're coming through me, you're not getting to the Father. I mean, that just doesn't, So God made all these billions of people, and they were just what? Chopped liver for the Christians, They were the only ones to be of any value. Doesn't make sense. Hang on, Wendy?
I've read this phrase, I am that I am, and I hadn't really fully appreciated the true meaning of it until I heard Leonard's intonation and the way in which he placed emphasis on certain parts of that sentence. And what really caught my attention was when he broke it down and said, I am that. Which to me is, I am all of everything, and everything is all of me. And then when he said, another way of parsing it is, I've always said, I am that I am. Instead, he said, I am that I am. And if you think of this, I'm not articulating this very well, but there's a resonance around his intonation that I had not experienced before that I find just profound in the manner in which I was able to experience that as a felt sense that I hadn't had before in just reading it. And I wonder if you might say something about that.
Well, that's it in a nutshell, isn't it? That language, like you can read something that's a report of what someone said, and it can appear very different. It can be cold. There's so much that's missing, like as you said, the inflection of his voice. And then, like I was talking about on Sunday, Aramaic, by all accounts, it's almost like some of the Asian languages, like Chinese and Thai language. Its intonation and inflection changes the sentence completely, and therefore so much can be missed, because that is a tricky one, like I am that I am. Are you saying that I am that? Am I pointing over there at something? I am that I am, or I am that I am. There's a whole different nuance there, and in the Eastern tradition, it's like I am that is one of the mantras, meaning I am all of this. So when Jesus said, I am that I am, did he do a gesture like that? We don't know. So the context and the inflection and the gesturing and, like what was transmitted in his voice can change that completely.
Well, and what's also just occurring to me is that the way that it was interpreted, as Leonard is saying incorrectly, I am the way, the truth, and the life, allowed the egoic person to then become the intermediary, the Eucharist, right? The manner in which this whole body of religious theory evolved as a function of that misinterpretation, and then developed its own sort of slipstream in a way for the rest of the world to then have to follow. And getting back to what we were reviewing in the earlier sections of Liberating Jesus, it's the seduction of having somebody else tell you how to do it, that takes the responsibility and imposes it upon another person, that completely then distorts further and distances us from the true, I believe, the true meaning of what he was expressing.
Right, and it's almost like, I mean, it's really perverse and sad. It's like you take what he said and then you go 180 away from that. Like, instead of saying, to find salvation, you must discover your true essence in you, and that your I am presence is the divine, and that's how you discover God. And what do you put? You go to you must go to this guy and you must believe in him, because he's the one who is going to lead you to God. The exact opposite to what he was saying. I mean, it is a travesty, really, when you think of it, what happened to Christianity. And I was going to say something else there. Catherine, you said something, Wendy, that triggered something. Now I can't remember. All right, so Richard was waiting, and then Claire.
Wow. I love you guys. I want to go a little deeper back to the I am, or the where it was, Claire, that no one comes to the Father. So Jerry, is this one of the places where what got translated as Father was Abba? And let me tell you the reason I'm asking, so you can add that too. So if it was Abba, if it was Daddy, and that I love, and I go to that image you gave us of, it's the affectionate term that Yeshua was using for God, as if he was a little boy sitting on the lap of his father, adoringly being protected and, loving the right. And if that's what he was saying, then we've got a connection to the Sufi beloved. We're talking about the way to come to this I am presence, or this oneness, being the I am within you as your way of being the one. He's saying, I think, the way to that is through that beloved, cherished little boy or little girl love of the one kind of way, which is a great way to get rid of the ego out of the story altogether, right? If you're coming in through this open heart, just sort of totally accepting of the little child for the parent. Anyway, that's where I was going, and I want to just know if there's any basis for that whole line of thought of scripture.
I mean, I would have to pull out some scriptural thing to say, was that the word that was used? But we know that he used the word Abba, and that he meant generally. So I don't know specifically in this case, but I would imagine that it was. But what you're describing is the sense of unity and oneness. Like, isn't that what we're looking for? We're looking for this sense of completeness and wholeness, which is why when the flower is just being the flower and it's saying, look at me, pay attention, you're looking at yourself. And so as you start looking around you and realizing that all of this, everybody that I'm looking at the moment, is me. It's the same essence, the same I am. Better than saying me, because me sounds too egotistical. But then you start to have the realization of who and what you are. And so you start to feel complete. I was thinking a while ago that it's almost like you don't know who you are, and so you start doing genealogy work, and then you come across some connection, some, you know, DNA thing gets traced, and now you've locked into this lineage. It's the same way, I think, here. Like, once the message is given that I am that I am, and you are that I am, then it's like, oh my God, I've discovered who my family is. I'm in this lineage of the essence that's in everything. So when I look at the flower, this is my brother, sister, which is what St. Francis says, or brother, sun, sister, moon. So it all just becomes family. And of course, you start to come alive. And the other thing that struck me is that, you know, in the early days of the Christian community, the name for them wasn't Christian. It was the followers of the way. And this was the way. This is what their practice was. Be in silence, breathe into the silence. Let the breath of spirit fill you. In other words, go deeper into the silence and into the present moment, and you will discover who you are. And this is the way to be a Christ, a Christian. Claire, was it? Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking about other scripture verses from the Gospels that probably also have that missing little word is. I am is the light of the world. I am is the bread of life.
Right.
And I am is the gate. I mean, it's just all those places where Jesus would say, I am, and people have read that and said, that's what Jesus is. That missing word was critical.
Right.
I am is the presence of I am is the light and the bread of life and all those things. So this is just beautiful. I'm really happy that I was here this morning for this.
Yeah. You know, as Joan Oliver would say, it's life living itself. So once you start to discover how you are life living itself, you come alive, because now it's like, wow, this is really rich stuff. Or instead of thinking that there's a bread outside of me that I need to eat, like, oh, there's some spiritual insight that I need to get over here from someone else. No, I am the bread of life. I can be nourished from within, and that will feed me. My spirit will feed me, you know. I am the door, I am the gate, I am the light of the world. In other words, that which is going to show me how to do this or where to go is within me. The light of the world is within me. Yeah. Anybody else? Richard.
I've got a follow-up to what Claire and other Wendy stimulated. So one of the, when I first heard the I am that I am, and I think this was as a teenager, I struggled with it, and I continue to struggle with really completely understanding the phrase. All of this is really wonderful we're doing today. And it reminds me the first expansion of that phrase to help me understand it was that I said, I am the I am that I am. And today I'm getting more understanding of, you know, what that means. Even after I came up with that, it was a little bit closer, I thought, to understanding the truth, you know, what the message was, but it was still not quite graspable. But today, and it was based on what Kathy Lee was saying, you know, the question, who am I? So the first I am, I replace it with who I am. You know, the question is, who am I? Okay. Who I am is, and put that is in there again, the I am presence, with meaning the unity, oneness presence that I am, that is personalized as me, as an individual experience.
Yeah, very good.
And that last I am is, once I got to that, it was like, well, duh, there's nothing, I can't be anything else. If the universe is a singularity, as the physicists say, if it's the one, as religion says, there isn't anything else. So the only answer to who am I is the I am that I am, the I am that I am. Right? And each time it means something slightly different that is coming from the oneness right here to me, but me not disconnected from the oneness. Anyway, so, and
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
jazzed. This is
Yeah.
wonderful. It's,
Yeah.
oh, and while you're thinking of that, can I just add one other thing back to Kathy Lee? This is just an aside. There is a whole practice in yoga called Nada Yoga for answering the question, who am I? And I did about 1.5 years when I was hitchhiking as a hippie back and forth across the country with just that meditation. That was my 5 minutes a day that was 24/7. And it was amazing. And what you do basically is you say, who am I? And then you listen for whatever answer comes up and you say, no, that's not it. That's not a complete answer. And oh my God, after 1.5 years of doing that, I basically burned out all of the possible, incomplete answers to that question. And the answer I finally got, I can't put in words.
Right.
It was a knowingness. And it's just, anyway, if you want to play that game, that's the best one I ever found, Nada Yoga.
Yeah.
You just say, who am I? No, not that.
Not that
Thank
complete.
you. Thank you for that information. That's interesting. And it wasn't a game to me. Those were all serious questions. I really took it to heart for years on end. But now I'm a lot less complicated than I used to be. I'm very simple. So I just go with what Unity says. It's so easy. It's I am love. I am light. I am power. I am presence. I am a creator. All of these things. That's who we are.
Yeah. Yeah, and the I am that I am is can be translated very simply. It's I am being itself. I am as amness. I am, life. And whatever form that takes, I am that. Whatever form it takes, including the ego. Because the ego is still part of the one presence.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just temporary, like in a certain form in this moment, energized with defensiveness or whatever, but then it goes back into its essence again. And I think Matt once said that the ego is just that part of us that the light hasn't fully penetrated yet. And that once the light does, then it sort of recognizes its deeper identity. Even the ego comes to realize, oh, I am part of the one. And I don't have to fear that I'm going to be killed off. Because that's the basic fear of the ego, which is why it obscures so much for us, because it doesn't want us to wake up, because it thinks if we wake up, it will get the heave ho. So it's very important that we rehabilitate, if you will, the ego, or our idea of the ego, and not have some negative connotation about it or towards it. So I promised that I would go back. So let me go back. We're running out of time here. Let me go back to the start of one section. It was at 42, 42, 45. Okay. Now let me get where we stopped first. 55, 80. Now we go back to 42, 45. Come on.
Truth or you don't, and you will be known by your response. Now, with your permission, there are some things I need to clear up. Let's start with Satan. As you know, I encountered Satan in the desert. Satan tempted me and tried to test me. But it was not Satan. It was not the devil. I now know that it was my own ego, which somehow projected itself outside of me and took on the form of Satan. Has anyone ever fasted for 40 days and 40 nights? Let me tell you what will happen if you do. You'll start hallucinating. You might even project your own ego outside of you. It was not Satan tempting me. It was not a devil. It was my own ego, but I did not realize it at the time. I thought it was some kind of devil, but at least I could see and hear what it was up to, and I could say no to its temptations. If it had not been projected outside of me, it might have seduced or deceived me, and I could have been lost forever. In a world of separation, a slave to my own ego. I am very grateful.
Okay, so he said, I could have been lost forever in my mind, my ego. And I mean, that's true for all of us. I don't think he was talking about eternally, but he's saying, you know, as a human being, unless I can see my shadow like manifest and it becomes so clear to me that I start to recognize the game that it's playing, then I'm just lost. I'm just lost in my mind in these mind games, and I'm never going to wake up. So that's how I would interpret what he said there.
So yeah, that was an important difference. I think I remembered it as I would have been lost. He said I could have been lost.
Yeah.
And the underlying reality is no one's ever lost, no one's ever
Right.
separate. But we take varying amounts of time, if time is real, to understand or to wake up.
Yeah, we're just waking up from our unconsciousness. And, you know, even Neil Donald Walsh writes about this, that what happens after you die? Well, you know, as a Catholic, you'll see Mary and Jesus and the saints and whoever, and if you're a Hindu, you'll see whoever your saints are and gurus and all that. And then it's sort of like, the way I think of it, it's a battery that still has some charge. And then the battery now isn't being charged anymore, and the energy is going to drain out of it. And then that sort of image that you have in your mind of what life is about and where heaven is and all of that will start to fade, and then you'll start to see reality for what it is. And I think so you wake up one way or the other. You know, the idea is, or the ideal is, that we wake up here and that we transform this into heaven on earth, rather than waiting until we get over there. Yeah. Hey, wonderful stuff. Thank you all for being here. and I've recorded it, so it's available for anybody else that you want to maybe prompt to take a look. And see you next week. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you all. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Gosh.
Thank you all. Love you.
Thank you,
Love you
guys.
too. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.